So as it frequently happens when you are looking at that area of interest, you will see that you will have data from different sources that can overlap. Even they can represent the same feature but are different. In this case, we had this, we have the digital nautical chart and the NGA topographic data store, both representing the shoreline in a different way. So we had this process called conflation that allows to somehow select, for example, a target source, or be able to find a combination of those two to be able to generate a better set of data to the end user. Here is another movie that shows the client interacting with, first, here is the two sources, and then invokes a special process, which is the CCI conflation. The user selects the different feature types and wants to be conflated. We are invoking the web processing service from ASU. I will provide details about the conflation process. And remember that these WPSs allow us to put any algorithm on the web. In this case, it was a very specific process, which is conflating two feature types. As you see, the result came back, and the result came in a way that allowed the client to display the source, the target, and what was conflated. If we look more into the detail, if we can zoom in, if we can zoom, we can see that we have the TDS, which was one of the original sources, and DNC, and then we have the black line, which is the conflated coastline, and we can see the orange transects that show what were the 2 points that were conflated from the original sources. So following the scenario, let's say now we have the boundary conditions, we're able to run the model. So we wanted to do inland coordination. And this is, we need to find the points of interest that can help the emergency responders. For example, fire stations. And the same as the shoreline, we have the case that we have fire stations from two sources, but they're different. So not all the sources like USGS and NGA have the same number of fire stations. So in this case, we're going to conflate these points. So, and again, this is a video that shows the worldview client interacting with these two sources of data. So you can see, for example, one follows the TDS schema, the other one follows the USGS schema. The attributes might be different, so it's not only the location that is different, but also the attributes. And similar as we did before, we invoke a conflation process, and this is all done via the client. So it's a very easy user interface for the user. In this case, where we have different attributes, the user can select and can define what is the relation of one attribute from one source to the other. So if we look more in detail, we will see that there is a source and a target, and you can define rule types such as matching field, or it's a fixed value, or if an attribute is missing, then it is added to the target. But the user can define this explicitly, so the mapping or conflation from the source to the target is done in a complete way. So the WPS, after we did the mapping of attributes or the rules, the WPS is called, and then we get back some information. We get the information, of course, in XML, which is rendered nicely by the client. So if we see more details, what was returned by the web processing service, we see first that has the information about what was conflated, right? What is the source and the target, and this is what we call provenance. The provenance allows to know that kind of information, but also others. For example, the result. When was it done? Oh, there were 19, for example, here, fire stations added. And for capturing the provenance information, since OGC specializes in spatial models, so forth, we're not experts in provenance. We try to see one of our other standards development of organizations, such as the W3C, where we have very good relations with, and the leaders of the Provenance Ontology participated in the working group, and we were able to create a Provenance Ontology that, or reuse the Provenance Ontology and create our own conceptualizations that allow us to capture the provenance of a conflation process using the elements from the provenance ontology. So you will see here, this was captured in something called RDF, or Resource Description Framework, and you can capture information about, like for example, who pushed the button and all the other information that I showed before. So the user also needs to provide some information about who did it, right? Who pushed the button, and also comments. This is also part of the provenance. For example, why was the conflation run? Why? Because then if other users are going to get or reuse that WFS later, they can go to the where the provenance lives and get information about those features and learn who did it, why, what was the source, what was the target, what was the WPS, when was that done. So after that information is captured, we update the WFS, and this is done via what we call a transactional web feature service, where we added, for example, the new geometries, right, the new fire stations, or we added the attributes that were missing in some of the features. And the provenance was updated in a SparkQL server. So this was a dedicated SparkQL server that allows to save, store, query the RDF, the Resource Description Framework, provenance, that had the information about the features that were conflated and the WFST. So as a conclusion to this part, before, when the user had different sources in a region, for example, wanted to run a model and had these two boundary conditions, the user had to select one. Here we had a better process that we allow to conflate, which then provides a more comprehensive data set to the end user. We're allowed to store the history of what was done, provenance, that will allow anybody to go and inspect what was done for certain features, and all the varying standards, not only OGC, but also other organizations that we have good relation with, that as such as the W3C. Another successful outcome from this activity was that the WPS reference implementation developed by 52 North said that they're going to include in the next releases the result of how the provenance was captured. So they were very excited about it, and that this is going to be part of the next releases. So if you are a user of 52 North WPS server, so expect to have this solution soon coming to you.